As we gather together this Sunday on the great feast of the Trinity, we gather with an awareness that over 100,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. We also gather with an awareness, a painful awareness of the anger and rage and sorrow and frustration of our brothers and sisters of color, which we have seen protested all week long, yesterday with 2,000 people marching right in front of our cathedral. So with these awarenesses, we might wonder, what really does the Trinity mean to our lives these days? Does it make any sense to us? What is it all about? Does it make any application to what we're going through in this great time of tumult? Well, the answer is most especially yes, because the Trinity is really a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for two reasons. It's important to us for two reasons. The first is, it really is a model for how we should live our lives. Secondly, it's about unity in diversity. The first point, it's a model for our lives because we're all made in the image of God. God is a trinity of persons, a community of persons. There are no isolated, self-sufficient, rugged individuals. There are three equal persons living together in community. Each person needs the other two persons to be God. So the Trinity is all about relationships. If we didn't understand that before, it's so important we understand it now. With this virus, with the anguish of our brothers and sisters of color, we need each other now more than ever. We cannot do it alone. We are interconnected. We rely on one another. As the spiritual writer Richard Rohr states, we need each other to be truly human. We're social beings. We're mutually interdependent. And this is evident at the beginning of life and the end of life. The newborn infant left to itself dies, and the very old person left to himself or herself dies. And in between this entrance and exit, we are still extremely dependent on one another. It's through these relationships that we identify ourselves and we become the person that God has given us the potential to become, especially at this time in history. The Trinity is a model for us to see ourselves as brothers and sisters no matter what race or creed or orientation. When our sisters and brothers of color shout, as they did yesterday, powerfully, Black Lives Matter, it can be easy to say, oh yes, but all lives matter. But unfortunately, our brothers and sisters of color do not believe or feel that their lives really matter. And this is what we have to understand. We have to know what they're saying to us. We could use another phrase, all lives cannot matter if Black lives don't matter. And of course, violence is not the answer. And thank God there has been little of it this past week since last Sunday morning. But Martin Luther King helps us understand the violence. He says, a riot is the language of the unheard. Thus, relationships demand that we listen to one another, that we hear the anguish of anyone who is oppressed. And that's how we avoid violence, and that's how we experience healing. The second point as to why the Trinity is important, because it's about unity in diversity. In the Trinity, there is no uniformity, but unity in diversity. Each person is unique, and all share in the divine nature in perfect unity. Each one of us is unique, but we share a common origin, a common nature, and a common destiny. And the Christian community begins with the acceptance of this unity in diversity. And it's this diversity that gives glory to our God. But unfortunately, for so many, diversity is a source of fear and suspicion and hatred. How devastating to the community is the unreasonable demand for uniformity. What a dull and boring world it would be if we were all alike. You see, the word Catholic means unity in diversity. Thus, the Trinity is so important because it's a wake-up call. It demands that we listen to one another, that we hear the cries of the oppressed. This is how violence ends, healing begins, racism is rooted out. Bishop Lucia wrote this: "The fear of dying because of the color of one's skin, along with the loss of human dignity and civil rights, is a wake-up call to all men and women of goodwill. The ensuing protests should shake us out of our slumber to be attentive to Jesus' own question in Luke, the parable of the Good Samaritan: who is my neighbor?" Two important challenges, then, that make Trinity extremely meaningful to us. We are all made in the image of God. We need one another. We are all different, and that's what makes us human. So during these very difficult days in our world and in our country, let each one of us, as Catholics and Christians, be challenged by the Trinity to model our interconnectedness, our need for one another, our unity in diversity. Let us hear the cries of our brothers and sisters, whatever color, race, creed, or orientation. Let us hear the cries of all those who feel they really don't matter.